Yeah, we're not doctors or giving any medical advice. This show is intended for educational purposes only, and you should talk to your doctor about any medical issues. Now, let's get at it.
Welcome to Chat the Fat, where nutrition authors Nissa Graun and Hale are going to break down common low-carb mistakes. Let's chat all things low-carb, keto, digestion, and more so you can maximize your results.
Hey, welcome back to Chat the Fat. This is episode 31. I'm TC Hale, and I have never once spelled the word necessary on the first try correctly.
That one's an easy word.
It's not an easy word. It's like, are there two C's or two S's? I think there's only one of them, but there's only one of them and two of the other, but is the one the C, is the one the S? I can't ever get it right. I get it wrong every single time.
Thankfully, we pretty much type everything these days and everything has spell check, so you don't have to worry about it too much.
I get auto-corrected, but I am here with Nissa Graun, who can keep this from going off the rails and help us to spell things correctly. How's it going?
I can. I always did really good in English. I was kind of teacher's pet, so I'm really good at spelling and correct grammar.
I was the opposite of teacher's pet. I was the, oh, he's here.
Yeah.
But the teacher did have me read aloud often because I would read in an entertaining way. And one time my English teacher had me read. She had a headache. So she's like, Tony's going to read aloud today. And so I was reading aloud from this book. And in the middle of reading, I just got up and walked out of the class with the book and kept reading, walked down the hall, got a drink of water from the fountain, came back, sat down and just kept reading like nothing happened. It was pretty good.
Nice. On one of my recent videos, someone told me that I would read children's stories very well, and I didn't really know what that meant, if that was a compliment or an insult. I'm not sure.
Maybe you're just condescending.
I don't know.
Okay, so this is our first episode with me in my new place, with my new studio. And the new studio is set up, but before we recorded, I realized, I don't even know where my microphone is. So I'm not at all prepared. And Nissa made an amazing outline of this show, and I haven't looked at it yet. So this is going to be a situation where this is your show, and I'm just along for the ride, and hopefully I have some type of input.
All right. Well, hopefully I wrote the outline correctly then. I guess we'll see.
We'll find out. Maybe I'll say, that's all wrong.
Yeah. All right. Well, this week we are talking about the ultimate weight loss trifecta, which is keto, intermittent fasting, and high intensity interval training.
No, that's not what it is.
Well, some people do call it keto, IF, and HIIT. I just thought all those acronyms might confuse people.
Right.
But there is a ton of information out there about keto, intermittent fasting, and high intensity interval training. But did you know that combining all of this information into one plan can actually lead to much bigger results?
I did not know that.
All right. Well, I am going to teach you that because that's part of the way that I got my big results.
Right. And it really is like, because a lot of people will see amazing results just by doing one of these things. And other people will see no results doing one of these things. And some people will see no results doing all three of these things because they're doing all three of them wrong. So we kind of want to go over how do we do this the right way and implement it so we get to actually see results.
Yes, because like you said, just following one of them maybe will work for some results, but you can really maximize your results by following all three correctly. So that's what we are going to talk about today. And I thought, since we're basically a keto podcast, that the first component of the trifecta for us is keto. So we're a keto podcast. We talk about keto almost every single week. And we also have a membership, the Keto Decoded membership, which is all about helping our members maneuver a low-carb diet in order to prime their body to successfully follow keto. Or some of our members even come in already following keto, but we are there to help them fine-tune their plans for better results so that they're following a proper keto plan that's right for them, both for better health and for also weight loss results. So since that's kind of what we do, that seems to be the obvious place to start with this weight loss trifecta.
Yeah, we also don't want people starting with intermittent fasting, and we'll get into some of that why in this episode too.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about keto, but we're not going to get into all the ins and outs because we pretty much have 20 something other episodes where that's all we talk about. But for those who want to know, why does keto work so well at burning stored body fat?
Yeah. Why is that?
Well, what I thought of, keto is really great at bringing insulin down. So your body is actually able to tap into its stored fat as fuel. And it's also brings inflammation down when you start removing so many processed foods like the healthy whole grains or even the junk foods that are regularly consumed by most people as food.
Right. And most people that have a significant amount of weight to lose can succeed on low carb. That's really all they would need to do to succeed in most cases. But um, going low carb can be really hard for a lot of people because they don't have the resources to function as a human being. So when they start going low carb, they either feel lousy, they have no energy, or they're having cravings, and or they're an emotional wreck and they're yelling at their neighbor and all that kind of stuff. So what keto can do is it can make that process a lot easier by not only helping you lose weight by bringing insulin down so your body can burn stored fat, but then it allows the person to have this backup fuel source of all of this stored fat that it can use for fuel so that the body's not yelling, hey, give me a ding dong.
And so something that I was really confused about all the years that I tried to follow low carb, like when Atkins was huge, and I'd only last for a little while, and then I would convince myself that it wasn't about low carb, it was just about the calories. And there's also studies that tell you this, which obviously is why I was confused. So there's a lot of studies that show following a low carb diet like keto works just as well as following calorie restriction over time. So why can't we just eat what we want and count calories instead?
Well, when you look at any study, you're usually looking at some form of fiction in there, one way or the other, just because most studies are paid for by somebody who's looking for a result that they want to prove that this is a thing, this is true. Because studies are really expensive. You can't just be like, hey, this weekend, should we do a garage sale or should we do a study? Like, you don't have the money to do a study. It's super expensive to do it the correct way. So you're looking at some fiction, and you don't know who you're looking at. And they'll do a study on, does uh, cutting your peanut butter sandwich into triangles instead of squares reduce migraines? And that's what they'll do a study on. And let's say that cutting it into triangles does reduce migraines for 51% of the people, but for 49% of the people, it makes their head explode and they die. The result of that study would be that cutting your peanut butter sandwich into triangles helps migraines. It wouldn't be that, wow, half the people die when they do this. It would be that 51% did this, so this proves that cutting into triangles fixes migraines, and that's the answer. So there's just a lot of confusion when you're looking at information from studies. So that's one aspect of it. And the other aspect of it is that we know that some people can cut calories and lose weight. The problem is that the people who are not set up to succeed doing that are going to fail miserably. And a lot of the people that do succeed are just powering through with willpower to lose the weight that they want to lose. And once they allow themselves to eat anything, they gain it all back plus 30 more. But the study still showed that reducing calories resulted in weight loss. Even though if you go back and check in with all of these people a few years later, or even 6 months later, they're like, oh, I didn't go on a diet. My pants don't fit. So it's, you know.
Yeah, I think I learned the hard way that calorie restriction, it definitely can work at the beginning. It's just really hard to keep up with over time. And then you just feel like you want to eat your arm off, which is a good way to lose weight. If you cut your arm off, you will lose weight.
Yeah, that's like 3 pounds right there, right?
But, over the long term, it doesn't really last for most people. And I think something else important to note here is a lot of times people will say that the weight you lose with calorie restriction, sometimes because you're cutting your calories so low, you're actually losing important weight like muscle mass, which obviously you don't want to lose. And a lot of the weight when you go on a low carb diet is actually more fat loss, because you're tapping into that, to your body fat stores. So yes, at the beginning, you're going to have an initial burst of water weight that you're going to lose, but
Right.
that's pretty true on any diet. But then once you start getting into losing weight, you're going to lose more fat with keto, whereas with the low calorie, maybe you're losing the same amount of weight, but a lot of it is muscle mass, which you want to keep.
Right. And the other thing is that a lot of people will hear that and be like, oh, well, I don't want to be muscly anyway, so I don't care. I'm just going to do this anyways. But the problem is, especially when the body needs protein and amino acids, one of the first places it goes to is your lungs, and it breaks down those tissues to access nutrients. So here's a hint: you need your lungs, so you don't want that happening.
No. And then, of course, there are many other health benefits that come with keto, including improving a lot of diseases of civilization, things like type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, or metabolic syndrome. So just counting calories to lose weight doesn't really have the same kind of track record when it comes to improving these health issues that a plan like keto has.
Right. And the things that are working for those types of things are either low carb, and just to allow insulin to come down, because that's usually the major form of inflammation in the body is constant high insulin. Um, keto does amazing things, and eating real food. When people just, they go paleo or just they're eating real food in any form, and they're removing all that processed junk that removes all of those burdens from the body. Those are the things that are really helping people improve all of those quote unquote diseases type things.
And it gets so confusing because you go to the store and you have all these like heart healthy labels on things like bread,
Right.
which isn't helping anybody.
Right. Well, that's the company that paid for the heart healthy label, basically is kind of how that goes. But it's not like, hey, I'm going to shop for a heart healthy label. It's just that the money going to those organizations that are creating the heart healthy labels are being pushed to believe that the false science is what's going on.
Yes.
So
I,
I like to do whatever the label doesn't say. And it's getting a little more tricky now, because now some of the labels are becoming accurate. But for, 2 years ago, all you had to do was just, if anything said that it was low fat, you knew it was going to make you fat. If anything said it was heart healthy, you were going to have a heart attack if you ate it. Like, you just had to do the opposite. So you can still kind of do that. But now, that with a huge paleo movement, a huge low carb movement, a huge keto movement, there's a lot more products that are available now that the labels are actually saying what can really happen and the benefits that you can really have from eating some of those things anyways.
yeah, so they are getting better in some aspects, but they're also getting trickier. Like I just had a low carb company who sells cereal send me a product, and I tried it without looking at the label, and then I had a headache for 3 days because it has potato starch in it, which I wouldn't really call that keto at all.
Right. Yeah. So you just got to watch what you're doing. And especially starting off, we always talk about how maybe you use some of these crutches for a little bit, but just the more you can lean towards actual food, the better that's going to be.
All right. And then what about intermittent fasting? What is it and why does it work to burn your stored body fat?
I know a girl who likes to talk about intermittent fasting a lot. Maybe she will do that.
I do. So, intermittent fasting, which maybe you've also heard referred to it as time restricted eating, is when you purposely go extended periods of time without eating. So, this also includes not drinking anything beyond water, black coffee, or tea. And that's if you're fasting properly, because there are people who say you could drink things like diet soda or add some cream and artificial sweeteners in your coffee, which I don't agree with, but some people say that. But going longer periods of time like that can help your insulin come down. So if your body is able to tap into its fat stores instead of burning the calories that you just ate for fuel.
Right.
And then, of course, fasting also gives your body a break from digesting food. So it allows it to focus on other tasks like healing or burning stored fat.
Right. So when do we not want to fast? When do we not want to fast? Who doesn't want to fast? Which kind of people shouldn't be fasting?
So typically, you'll want to wait to start any kind of extended routine until you're fat adapted, which usually comes along with following keto for at least a few weeks. I don't know if you agree with this. So when I first started out, I was doing like 12 to 14-hour fasts, and I wasn't fully fat adapted. And I thought that that helped my progress. Are you okay with 12 to 14-hour fasts without being fat adapted?
I think if you are in motion towards becoming fat adapted and you're moving, you're doing some of those things, then it could speed up that process. And maybe uh, you have some kind of bad things going on a little bit in the beginning, but not for long enough that it's going to cause a problem. So I've always been very against intermittent fasting until I understood keto better. And until I understood that once your body is fat adapted and able to access fat stores for fuel, that your body has that fuel source and it won't freak out when there's no fuel coming in. Because basically, when a person intermittent fasts and they're not fat adapted, your body is looking for glucose. And when it's not available, uh, you're going to elevate stress hormones and create these kind of responses where the body is like, hey, I got no fuel. I'm kind of freaking out here a little bit. So that's why I don't like intermittent fasting if someone's not fat adapted. But if your body's doing that in the process of becoming fat adapted, and you're not just going to be eating more carbs later that day and every single day, then all of those downsides aren't going to last very long. Certainly not long enough to create any kind of problems. And your body is going to be in a little bit more of a hurry to say, okay, what else can we do? What other options do we have? Oh, yeah, we have fat. Let's start using that more efficiently.
Okay. And yeah, when I was doing the 12 to 14-hour fast, when I started out, I was definitely eating low carb. I just wasn't keto yet. I don't think I knew what keto was.
Right. So when you're low carb and the insulin is not going so high, it doesn't take as long for it to come down so that your body can access stored fat for fuel. Because when insulin is high, your body can't really even access stored fat for fuel because the high insulin is telling the body we're using glucose right now. That's what we're kind of doing. We're storing fat. We're not using it. So when blood sugar comes down, in most cases, it takes another few hours or longer for insulin to come down and get into a zone where your body can burn the stored fat. But if you're just eating small amounts of carbs, your insulin doesn't go very high and it doesn't take so long to get back into the zone where you can burn fat. So when you're starting off doing those fasts, when you're already low carb, you're able to get into an area where your body can burn fat much faster than if, okay, I'm going to eat pizza and donuts for dinner, and then tomorrow morning I'm going to intermittent fast until about 3 o'clock when I'm going to have Pop-Tarts to warm me up for my pizza and donuts for dinner. So when you're doing that, Pop-Tarts, pizza, donut combos make your insulin way too high for it to probably even come down again into a fat burning zone by the time you're eating Pop-Tarts again.
I do belong to some fasting groups on Facebook, and there are people that follow that plan.
Yeah, there really are. And the ones that do see some success have insulin that is so overly effective that they can process a meal of pizza and Pop-Tarts and donuts all together with a small amount of insulin. They don't need as much insulin as you or I might use, because if I eat that, man, I'm going to be the captain of insulin. My insulin's going to have to go really high in order to process all that sugar. And so with anybody who is leaning more towards the insulin resistant side, and most people who are have a significant amount of weight to lose are leaning towards the insulin resistant side. It doesn't mean that they're insulin resistant, but it's going that direction, and the insulin is usually not overly effective. But if it's overly effective, they can process all that with a small amount of insulin. So then it doesn't take as long for their insulin to come back down and their body to get into a zone where they have the ability to burn stored fat. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. And
And
just
so
because
listeners, if that didn't make sense, call in now and let us know. And we don't have a phone, but just call
we need to get an audience, a live audience.
in.
Um, so there are people out there, a lot of people out there who follow intermittent fasting, and they also don't follow keto. So they're still finding success. Do you think those people who are eating donuts and Pop-Tarts for their one meal a day, do you think that they're getting into ketosis by not following a keto plan?
I would doubt that their ketosis would be significant if they're doing this, every single day. But again, the real tragedy in all of this is that a person with very overly effective insulin, which a lot of times are these hypoglycemic people who their lives are being tortured by this overly effective insulin because they have these huge spikes and crashes and all this stuff. Uh, so removing some of those spikes and crashes each day by doing intermittent fasting might even make their life better just because they're having few trouble. But the real problem is that they're telling people this is how you do it. And look at what I'm doing and look at the success that I'm having. So then a person who doesn't have overly effective insulin does the same thing and their body's freaking out and raising all kinds of stress hormones because they never get to access the stored fat for fuel. They don't have that backup fuel source. Maybe mineral levels are already low for them. And so the freak out is even heavier on the body and it's more pronounced and the stress hormones go even higher. So the real problem is that the people that it does work for, they're telling other people to do it and it's creating a lot of problems for them.
So what do you think about maybe not the people that just eat donuts and Pop-Tarts? Because while they are out there, not everyone follows that lifestyle. But what about people who are eating more sensible meals, like real food meals, but maybe they also have carbs in there that are higher than a level of ketosis? Do you think that they're just not that insulin resistant and that's why intermittent fasting works for them?
If it's working for them and if it's when I say it's working for me, the person might feel okay, they might be losing weight, but we don't know what weight they're losing. We don't know what other problems are being created by elevated stress hormones in the background. If stress hormones are going high and estrogen levels are going really high, because estrogen is a stress hormone, high estrogen causes a lot of problems that females deal with today. So this person might be thinking, hey, look, I feel okay, but all of a sudden now I can't get pregnant anymore, and they don't understand what's going wrong. So it's not always as cut and dry as someone would think. But my stance is that I don't like anybody to do intermittent fasting unless they're also fat adapted. But keep in mind that some people could eat low carb or even the occasional higher carb and still be fat adapted if they're processing those carbs very efficiently. So again, it kind of goes back to the person and what their chemistry is kind of doing.
So in our keto decoded course, and we also have a fasting decoded course, we typically recommend combining keto and intermittent fasting for improved results. And the reason that we recommend them to be fat adapted first is because if they're stressing their body out with both a ketogenic diet, just adapting to that, and they're also stressing their body out with a new intermittent fasting plan, then that can put them back into fat storing mode because they're just stressing their body out way too much by attempting both plans at once.
And that'll have a lot to do also not only with the effectiveness of the insulin, but also the level of minerals in their body. Because remember, if mineral levels are low, then the body's going to freak out a lot faster than it would if there was plenty of minerals in there to kind of buffer the system and allow everything to work correctly when glucose goes super low. So just because that's so common, it can be so problematic, and almost everybody in that situation who tries to do keto and IF at the same time, they're pretty much gonna fail because of that. And they're gonna snap and go insane and find themselves knee deep in a box of Oreos and not even realize that it's happening until it's too late. So because of that reason, we don't even allow people to take our intermittent fasting course until they've graduated our keto decoded course, just so that they fully understand what their chemistry is doing in with keto and any problems they might need to correct in order to have better success, all that kind of stuff.
Okay. And I know there's a lot of people out there that, they hear about how great keto and IF are together. So they just want to jump headfirst into both. And they might say, well, which comes first, a keto plan or an IF plan? And so we said this, but in case you didn't hear us, or in case you chose not to hear us, you definitely want to start out with a keto plan. And then once you feel like you're fat adapted, then you could start adding in intermittent fasting.
Right. And you'll know, and what I like to see people really do is to naturally add in intermittent fasting, like without putting on the calendar, this is what I'm going to do it. What I like to see people do is to go, whoa, it's like 11:30. I haven't eaten anything. I wasn't even hungry. What happened? And what's going on is your body is just becoming more efficient at burning fat, and you will just naturally intermittent fast. You'll naturally like not even eat at all that day until 2 or 3, and everything feels good. It's all working correctly. Weight's coming off. That's the way I really like to see people do it. There's a lot of steps that we teach in the intermittent fasting course to turbocharge fasting and to do different techniques and fancy jazzy tricks and all kinds of stuff that you teach, and all those things can really magnify results. um, but man, when someone just like, oh, I guess I'm intermittent fasting, that's kind of awesome when it just kind of happens accidentally.
Yeah, and that can happen. And that has actually been happening to me a lot lately, where I've just been busy with something and I realize it's 4 o'clock and I haven't eaten yet.
Right.
So that does happen. But when I first started intermittent fasting, I've also heard other people say it just happens with keto. And it didn't really just happen with me. Like, I had to force it at first. And that's even when I started going longer periods. And I think it was more of a mental shift than it was a physical shift, because mentally we're used to eating 3 meals a day and 2 snacks each day. And so if you're in the habit of doing that for 30 plus years for your entire life, sometimes mentally it's just hard to get out of that state, even if physically you don't really feel like you need to eat.
Right. And a great thing to remember is just that, since we know that this is going to vary from person to person, if you want to start into intermittent fasting after you've started keto and you go with it, if it doesn't go well, then just know that, hey, it's not time for you to do this yet. You need to adapt a little more. You need to maybe raise mineral levels. Maybe you need to fix some digestive issues. Maybe there's some imbalances that are making it too difficult for you to do this right now. And maybe you just have a little more work to do. But that doesn't mean that you're broken or fasting doesn't work for you. Maybe you just kind of jumped into it a little bit too early.
And so, like I said, I had to, not, I don't want to say force it, but, I did have to pay attention to my times and wait a little bit later to eat. But I did get started with intermittent fasting even before I was officially fat adapted. And I did tell my full story back in episode 23. So in case you didn't listen to that one, go back and check it out. But when I started with a low carb plan and then began a really easy intermittent fasting routine where I just stopped eating for 12 hours a day, which to a lot of people now sounds crazy, but back in the day, it was just kind of normal. Like, you ate dinner and then you didn't eat again until breakfast, and the time period in between that was 12 hours. And I see a lot of people that just do like late night snacking, and then they need to eat the second they wake up. I know my husband used to be that way and it drove me crazy. He's different now, but so I don't think personally that fasting for 12 hours each day is really placing that much of a stress on your body, especially like you said, if you're working towards becoming fat adapted. And I also recently, I've always talked about this tip, but it's something that I heard reinforced on a different podcast lately, that stopping eating after dinner and not eating at least 3 hours prior to bedtime can have really amazing health benefits for you, even if you're not following keto. And this is because it's allowing your body time to digest the food that you ate. So this way you're going to sleep better and your body isn't busy digesting the food instead of sleeping. And on the podcast, I heard him say that you actually don't have any time to burn the food that you eat prior to bedtime. So basically, any food that you're eating within 3 hours of bedtime is likely going to be stored as fat. What do you think about that?
I don't agree with that, because that's more about how effective digestion is working. And,
Okay.
when digestion is working, or the body kind of goes into a parasympathetic state, and that can be more of a rest and digest kind of state. So if a person doesn't have the ability to digest very well, and maybe just moving around a little bit is helping them digest a little bit more effectively. If they go to bed right after that, then sure, that food is going to rot and ferment more and create more toxins and all that kind of stuff. But there was a time when we believed that you needed to burn the food you ate before you go to bed, or it was going to get stored in fat. But that time was like 15 years ago, so we don't really believe that anymore. But one really good point that you made, about when you started fasting, when you weren't fat adapted yet, I think the best way to view it is that, remember that there are people successfully intermittent fasting with one meal a day, and the one meal is Pop-Tarts. And there are other people who can't go more than 2 hours without eating something, or they will get fired because they will become an amazing jerk, and they can't be a rational human being without that fuel every 2 hours, because their body is so reliant on that glucose. So for most people, you're going to fall somewhere in between those two, extremes. A person that can burn fat right after eating a Pop-Tart, and the person that needs that consistent thing. So most people are going to fall in the middle somewhere. So that's why we like to see people at least allow your body to start learning how to run more on fat by doing low carb, leaning more towards keto, and then testing out how you do when you start intermittent fasting a little bit. Do you do well, or are things starting to go wrong and you don't understand why? If that's the case, and it's usually stress hormones going too high and causing problems.
So either way, and maybe my son just doesn't digest food well, but I definitely always recommend to people to stop eating within 3 hours after bedtime, or
Before bedtime?
within 3 hours before bedtime. Don't eat 3 hours after bedtime either, because that's
Right, right.
but I always recommend 3 hours before bedtime. And part of the reason is a lot of people that deal with weight issues, late night is the worst time. That's when they already have decision fatigue going on. So the choices that they pick aren't going to be the best. They might even eat non-keto foods. So that's definitely one of the big reasons. Another reason is I noticed, like, my son, if he didn't eat his dinner and he'll beg me for a snack right before bedtime, those are the nights that he wakes up at 2 a.m, like crying. And I noticed if I stopped giving him snacks after dinner, that he would sleep through the night. So that's just what I noticed with him. But his
Yeah, and with
digestion is probably
kids,
not great.
right? With kids, it's not that their digestion is bad. It's just that it's not fully developed yet. Because a person's digestion, a lot of people believe it is not fully developed until almost puberty, even. So when they're that young, we just kind of have to believe that it's just not doing like it would be an adult. And I guess it could also depend on the type of snacks that he has before you go to bed. Like if it was something that would create a bigger spike and crash, that could be what creates the problems. And I've seen that with Jack's before too. Because like, let's say a person is eating carbs, like it's a kid and they're eating carbs. I like them to have protein with those carbs, because if they just have carbs, like a snack by itself, the spike and crash will be more significant than if they ate those carbs with protein and fats and like a whole meal kind of thing. So in that regard, I could definitely see that a snack could cause all kinds of trouble like that. But I don't want you to view that as saying that food will get stored as fat because you ate it too close when you went to bed. Because when we go to sleep, our body's still doing a lot of stuff. There's a lot of reasons not to eat right before you go to bed, though. I definitely agree with that. I like to see somebody do 2 or 3 hours, and if they're keto, they can probably do 4 or 5 or more, just because they don't need that kind of food. There are other circumstances where I want people to eat 2 hours before they go to bed, or they won't be able to sleep, and that's a different. Let's not get into that. That's a whole different topic.
Okay.
Maybe we'll cover insomnia in a different topic kind of thing. But yeah, so 2 to 3 hours before bed is very reasonable for most people, just for everything. As far as sleeping better. A lot of people will get reflux and stuff like that during their sleep if they eat too close to bed, all those kinds of issues. Uh, but if somebody's having problems from eating too close to bed, it usually has to do with some aspect of digestion not working correctly. Because when it's all working correctly, the body should just kind of work correctly, no matter what we do. As cavemen, it wasn't, sometimes you ate and you went right to sleep because you were tired from chasing a leopard all day or whatever that kind of was. So when the body's working correctly, we don't have to do all these things that people do that see results, like whether they're doing a blood type diet or I'm going to do food combining, all these things that people do where I feel better when I do this. It's because you're having to maximize things and make everything as easy as possible for a body that's not functioning correctly. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so we typically say that combining keto and intermittent fasting works better for most people rather than following just intermittent fasting on its own. And the reasons that we have for this is keto is already bringing your insulin down, and longer periods of fasting will bring it down even more. So this is allowing your body to access its stored fat. And also, eating carbs during your feasting window can lead to cravings and hunger, which can make the fasting window much harder. And of course, we already talked about it's much harder to get into a fat adapted state where you can switch to burning fat as your main fuel source if you're still eating a lot of carbs during your feasting window, even if they're real food carbs. So practicing extended fasts while you're not fat adapted can lead to too much stress, which can make burning fat more difficult. Did you have any other reasons to add?
Yeah, we talk a little bit about how IF can magnify ketosis for those who may be having a hard time. Maybe they're just getting into a very low state of ketosis and they're not, losing as much body fat as they want to, but they are still seeing a little bit. IF can be a great way to kind of magnify that a little bit.
And do you think also adding intermittent fasting helps people with impaired digestion because it's giving them time to rest, their digestion time to rest?
It really can, just because there's so many resources that go towards digestion. Like the act of digestion takes more resources than just about anything we do. And that can be another problem that can be caused by somebody eating too close to bed. If somebody has really low resources and all the resources are going to go towards digestion, it can kind of send the body into we don't have a lot of resources. We're going to kind of panic a little bit. And they kind of go into that fight or flight state where they can't sleep so well. So that's another case where, man, eating right before bed is really going to ruin that person, so to speak. So yeah, if a person has low resources, but they have the ability to burn fat, now skipping meals here and there allows fewer resources to be needed to digest food again. It's kind of counterintuitive a little bit because you're like, well, you're going to get more resources when you eat more food, but it just doesn't always work that way when digestion is really impaired. And sometimes a little bit of a break can be great as long as the person has some type of fuel source to use during that break, like fat.
And so we're kind of on this topic, and I actually just got this question today from a friend. He said he was listening to a podcast, and he asked me if I had ever heard of digestive ease. He said that the podcast he was listening to talked about athletes actually eating too frequently, which requires a lot of stress on their digestive system and takes energy away from their other systems. So are people who are telling athletes to constantly eat wrong, or is it right for them?
I've heard a lot of people that have that opinion, and I certainly, we've kind of talked about some circumstances today, specific circumstances where that could really be true. So I'm okay with that possibly being true in some situations for sure. Again, I think it has to do with the food the person's eating. What are they kind of pushing their body towards processing more than other things, all that stuff. But the important thing is, when your body has backup fuel sources, you don't need to eat as often or as much. And when it's running in a way where it doesn't have backup fuel sources, you're going to kind of need to eat more. So again, because think about it, if a person doesn't have backup fuel sources and they're expending more resources doing all of these training, for whatever sport they're talking about, And yeah, they might need to eat a little more often. But again, if all their resources are going towards the digestive process, you can see how that would be problematic too. So I got no solid answer there. I don't know
Well,
if you noticed
that's
that.
kind of what I told him, but I didn't sound as fancy. I just said that every time he eats, his body's going to focus on digestion
Right.
first and then other things second. So if you keep eating all day, you're just going to be digesting all day.
Right. And which is one of the reasons that I feel that, let's say someone does some crazy, let's say someone has never worked out before. So they're like, oh, well, I'm going to just go and do, um, oh my gosh, I totally dropped the name. What's the most popular workout where people, it's like a cult, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's actually what he does.
All my friends, I don't know why I can't think of this word right now. That's unbelievable. But CrossFit. Okay.
Yeah,
So
CrossFit, that's what he does.
yeah. So say nobody's ever worked out before and they're like, I'm just going to go do a CrossFit workout. That's a really intense, difficult workout. And a lot of those people will throw up in that workout. And what the body is saying is that we're putting too much energy into this insane workout that you're having us do. We can't also digest food. So we're just going to send this food back where it came from so we don't have to worry about that process right now. And we can try to, continue this ignorance that you're doing to us. So that's why you see a lot of people just hurl when they're doing something like that.
Yeah, one of my very first clients that I worked with when I started a few years ago, she was obsessed with CrossFit, but it was just breaking her down. And she was trying to do CrossFit like 5 days a week, and she wanted to start keto, and she was just stressing her body out so much. And I tried to talk her off the ledge, but she was just in that cult.
Right. Yeah. You see people getting great results and like, I want those great results. I'm going to do what those people are doing. So
Yeah.
I'm not against CrossFit. I'm not against intense workouts. We're going to kind of talk about some of them here right now. But again, you need to listen to your body a little bit. And are you right for that in this current situation?
Yes, so we are going to talk about the workouts that are often referred to referred to as HIIT workouts. So that stands for high intensity interval training. And these short but mighty workouts can help you burn fat at a faster rate, as well as reduce your risk for things like metabolic syndrome, obesity, high blood pressure, high blood sugar. And the good news is most of these types of workouts can be completed in 30 minutes or less, which means that you'll be building muscle, burning fat, and boosting your metabolism in less time than a lot of people tell you you need for a workout.
Right. And the reason I like this is because I like there to be intensity in some types of workouts, not all. We're big fans of fasted walking in the morning, and the walking is easy. It's not intense. It's a breeze. You're just walking.
Yes, I actually just started the most recent keto challenge, and it's crazy to me how many people mark sedentary on their request form. And so I've been lecturing all week long about more walks. Just get up and walk.
Yeah, it's not hard. So, that can be very appropriate, but I'm also a fan of intensity, especially when it comes to resistance training, because it's the intensity that's telling your body, oh, we have to change the way that this muscle is structured in order to do this stupid thing that this guy is trying to get us to do, because we can't do it. It's too intense for us to do it very many times or for very long. So we're going to change this muscle structure. We're going to make more muscle here, or make the muscle stronger and healthier, and rebuild it in a better way so that we can do this. So I like intensity to be there because that's how you create change in your body. And that's what most people are trying to do. They're trying to look better naked. And that's what you do. You change the structure of your body to look better naked. So I like there to be intensity there, but a lot of people can't sustain that intensity for a high frequency or for a long period of time, either because they don't have the resources to do that, or maybe they're already leaning too catabolic in that body breaking down all the time kind of state, and too much intense workout is going to push the body further into that state and make them break down and fall apart at the cellular level even more. So the reason I like this HIIT stuff is because it allows you to get a little bit of the good sides of both worlds, even if your body is not operating optimally in all ways.
Yes, and it does come with quite a few benefits. And so some of those include building lean muscle while you're burning fat, burning more fat while you're at rest, increasing metabolism and endurance. Also, you get workout variety and you have more effective workouts in less time. So, how does these HIIT workouts get you into a zone where you burn more fat?
Well, one thing that you just said too is a great part of it is that you're not in the gym for 3 hours, because
Yeah.
when you're in the gym for the 3 hours, then, oh man, I didn't even have time to wash my pajamas. And now your life is getting away from you. And then all of a sudden I can't do this. I'm going to quit going to the gym altogether. But if your workouts are 30 minutes each time, then you're like, oh, that was nothing. That was hardly even a blip in my day. And I still get to actually have a life. So I believe that's one benefit that should not be overlooked. Also, while discussing that, I completely forgot your question.
So, how is doing these HIIT workouts getting you into a zone where you're burning more fat than just, say, a regular 45-minute session on the treadmill?
Now, for most people, um, doing any type of intense or resistance type workout, you're not going to actually be burning fat for fuel while doing that. Now, if someone's really fat adapted and they're keto, or they're not, spiking insulin a lot, then the body is more equipped to use some fat in that process, I believe. There's a lot of people that go back and forth and disagree a lot on those different things. And I'm fine with that disagreement there. But for most people, they're not going to burn fat during the workout. You're just setting up your body to burn a lot more fat for the rest of the day, and even into the next day, even for a lot of people. So by stimulating those muscles and making them do things where they need to improve, you're going to kind of generate more motion inside the body, more activity in the body, more repair, more rebuilding, all that kind of stuff. And that process can basically says the body, hey, let's use more resources. Let's kind of do more, use more of these resources to make the body better. And so since we're using so many of these resources, let's use more fat for just getting around and for daily energy and that kind of thing. So it speeds up that process of your body burning stored fat for fuel purposes.
So, a lot of people are going to hear this and they're going to be like, great, shorter workouts where I burn more fat. I am going to do this every day, twice a day. How often do you recommend these people should really do a HIIT workout?
I still, I only work out, 3, maybe 4 days a week. If that, just because when I'm working out, I want to hit a muscle very hard, and then I don't want to hit that muscle group again until next week. And that's just the way that I like to do it. I want to hit it hard and then give it a full week to recover and rebuild. A lot of people, especially professionals, are going to do that, a lot more often. But most of them still like to just hit one muscle group at a time. They certainly don't want to do those muscle groups 2 days in a row, because then you're tearing it down before it has a chance to rebuild and repair again. So that's why I don't really like to see people doing this twice a day. First of all, get on with your life a little bit. Have a life. A life will do a lot for your health, more than you think it will. There were times that I didn't know that, and I certainly didn't follow that, but I understand it now. And you want to let your body recover. You don't want to continue to put it in that stress state all day. You want to put it in the stress state for a small stretch of time and then let it recover and do the things that it does that allow the body to improve. Do you have reasons why you don't like people to do it twice a day?
I was kind of exaggerating when I said twice a day, but even there's a lot of people out there that say that you shouldn't do a high intensity interval training any more than like 2 to 3 times per week.
Which I don't know about the should being there, but for a lot of people, I would definitely say they shouldn't do that more than 2 or 3 times a week. If resources are really low, they don't want to do that. If you're going to be hitting the same muscle groups, a lot of people are not going to want to do that more than once a week per muscle group. So that 2 to 3 times a week really could fit in for a lot of people. But if somebody has a lot of things going right and they want to do 5 days a week, I don't think it's the worst possible thing. I think they can see great benefit as long as they're not already too catabolic, because if they are, they're going to make that worse working out 5, 6, 7 days a week. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense to me because I was definitely there for a long time.
Right. Yeah, me too.
All right. So, do you have any? So we talked about keto first, and then IF, and then HIIT. So is that the general pattern you would follow as to when to bring things in? Start with keto, then when you're ready, add intermittent fasting, and then when you feel good there, then start high intensity exercise?
I'm okay if with somebody starting with HIIT first before they. I don't feel like anybody needs to be keto to do HIIT. Um, I don't feel like anybody needs to be anything really to do HIIT, as long as they're taking into account the other things that we just talked about. Um, but of course, I always want to see somebody do keto before they're doing IF, and to maximize these things, obviously keto first. IF can magnify the keto, and then because it might be harder to get into a better state of ketosis while doing HIIT, um, it might be better to become a little more fat adapted before you start doing the HIIT. So I think that might be an optimal thing, but I'm not going to write it down as here's the steps and the orders that they need to go in for each person, other than the keto before IF. But there are some, I feel like there's more pros to getting in a really good state of ketosis before you start IF, if getting in a good state of ketosis is your goal.
And do you think that there's a certain time period that you should eat something after you do a hit? Like, can you, because I personally, like, I'll fast all night and then I'll do an Orange Theory workout, which is a HIIT workout, first thing in the morning, maybe at like 8:30, and then I still wait an hour. Sometimes I feel really good and I wait a few hours before I eat if I'm just not hungry.
Right. And there's a lot of people who will talk about if you're waiting too long, then to recover from that workout, your body's going to start breaking down tissue to access those nutrients to use in that recovery process. And are you kind of wasting your time? And, you know, I, I think that that's going to vary too drastically from person to person to put a rule on that. I used to feel strongly about that. I used to feel strongly about um, needing to eat within about an hour after doing an intense workout, but not too soon after that intense workout, because it's after the intense workout that your body can really burn a lot of fat effectively. But if someone's more fat adapted, I'm fine with them waiting longer before they eat after an intense workout.
Okay. Yeah, I usually just go based on how I feel. If I'm not hungry, I don't want to eat food because that probably means my body is busy burning stored fat, which is what I want.
Right. That could be.
All right. So just to recap, some of the benefits of adding high intensity interval training to your keto and IF routine. Some of those benefits include you don't have to perform the workouts as often because they're so intense, and they can really add a boost of fat burning to your efforts. You're obviously also spending a lot less time in the gym, which means that you'll have more time to focus on what you're eating when it's time for your feasting window. And what you eat is always going to bring more results than working out. So maximizing your workout time in order to have more time to plan what you eat is going to help you bring more results. And finally, you're likely adding more lean muscle with high intensity workouts, which means a better body composition, and you're set up to burn more fat while you're at rest.
That's good. And I do like the high intensity workouts to be shorter, just for the reasons that we talked about. I know we got to go wrap up here pretty soon, so I don't know if Joey's going to yell at us or somebody's going to be doing some yelling if you don't get going. But what else? What I wanted to say is, where can people see this on YouTube?
For my videos?
Yes, and some of the episodes we have on YouTube too.
Yes, so we have many of our episodes that we do our videos, and they can just search for Eating Fat as the New Skinny on YouTube, or they can just, click through any of my social media. I always promote the videos each and every week. We have new podcast episodes that go up on Mondays, and then we have new shorter videos that you've probably heard on our Fridays, and those videos go up every Wednesday.
Okay. And you can be up to you if we want to do a listener question. If we want to save that for next week, we can do that too. Since we
Um,
only.
I still have a few minutes. We can do that.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. So Darla from Pekin, Illinois, and I'm from Illinois, but I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. She said that she seems to go out of ketosis far easier than she can get into it. And when she gets back into it, it's not always that consistent. The first time she reached ketosis was only 4 days after Christmas and after eating lots of cookies. More recently, she had one small dessert and it took her 8 days to get back in. Then she ate nothing wrong, maybe had a few too many veggies, and she's been out for 5 days. So she wants to know if we can give any rhyme or reason for what plays into getting back into ketosis.
Yeah, don't view it as what you ate and where your ketosis was, because those are certainly not the only factors. Don't view it like, oh, I just need a bunch of those cookies and I'll be back in ketosis faster than I am by not doing anything wrong, because there's all of other life going on too. For some people, the holidays are more stressful. For some people, it's actually a time to have off work, whereas work was the more stressful part. But all those things are factors in what's going on, and how your insulin is responding to what you're doing. And it's your, remember, it's your abilities, it's your insulin's, it's how effective your insulin is and how much insulin your body needs to make to process those carbs. That has a lot to do with how soon you can get back into a fat burning state. So a lot of those things are going to be at play, but you might want to look at, are you leaning a little too catabolic? And if you are, that imbalance may be magnifying how long it takes you to get back into ketosis, because it's making your insulin a little bit, I'm going to say weaker. That's not really what it is, but that's a good way to kind of view it, to where it's just not as effective. So kind of look at what's going on at different times in your life, because there's different things that can make a person a lot more catabolic, a lot less catabolic, make their insulin a lot more effective or a lot less effective. Kind of look at where your urine pH is when things are going well and when they're not going well, and see if you can correlate what's going on. Because for most people, when their urine pH is a little higher, their insulin will be a little bit more effective. That's not a rule. It's just kind of what we usually see. And when urine pH is really low, a lot of times the insulin may be not quite as effective. So just start looking at your chemistry and see if you can figure out if something jumps out and makes actual sense.
The only thing that I have to add is stop eating cookies and
Yeah,
desserts, and then you'll just stay in.
right. You won't have to worry about how long it takes you to get back in. You'll just be in.
Yes. All right, so that was our listener question. And then we also have a quick product review. So I thought we could do the Keto OS, which are exogenous ketones. And I thought this would be good because I personally, the only time I've ever taken ketones was in order to boost my high intensity workout. So that's when I was taking them. But I know my husband actually was recommended getting these when he was having trouble getting into ketosis, because he's very, very insulin resistant. So I don't know, what do you think about using ketones to get into ketosis?
I usually don't use them. If someone's having a really hard time, like Jason was, I'm fine with like, hey, test this out and see how that goes and see if it helps. But I also kind of view it as when those come in, it's almost like a fuel source for the body. So the body doesn't have to work as hard to get into that burning fat state. It just has this fuel that just kind of came in. Whether that's completely accurate or not, I don't know. That's just kind of the viewpoint I sort of have. So I don't punch anybody in the face if they're going to use some, but I don't push it on anybody and tell anybody to do it either.
Yeah, because there are people that say both things. So some people say if you're very insulin resistant, you kind of need that boost to get into ketosis. So here they are, use them. But the people that say that are usually the people that are also selling them. So
Right. I think if it was effective for someone to help them get into ketosis, I would like to see them then come off of it and see if they can stay in ketosis on their own. I think that would be what I would prefer if they used it.
yeah, and I personally, I didn't use it for very long. The ketones that I was using, I didn't use them because most of them contain stevia or some other kind of artificial sweetener, and that's because I've heard if you just take ketones, they taste really, really bad.
Oh, yeah.
So they all have to have a sweetener in there. And I just personally don't do well with sweeteners, especially while I am fasting. So I guess if anyone wants extra ketones, I have a bunch here if you want to come pick them up.
Right, I was gonna say, I can tell you didn't use them because they're still in the package.
Yeah, we actually have a whole bin full that, I don't know, I guess people want them, we could just send out prizes.
Right, yeah. And two more things before we go is that if you want to see a little bit more about how to do the HIIT workouts, we have a free HIIT guide that you can download on the show notes page. So just go to chatthefat.com/episode 32, and you'll
31.
see link 31, right? 31, because next week is 32. And what are we talking about next week?
So next week, we talked a little bit about intermittent fasting on this podcast, but believe it or not, there's actually so much to know about not eating. So we are going to get more into intermittent fasting do's and don'ts.
Okay. And before we go, we just need you to spell necessary.
Me?
Yes. You talk a big talk. Let's see you do it.
I don't have spell check.
There's no spell check on your microphone.
Necessary, and there's no spell check to tell me if I'm wrong or right, so I'm going to say I'm right.
I'm going to go ahead and say you're right too. Okay.
All right.
We will see you guys next week.
Bye.
Whether you're brand new to keto or just looking to move past roadblocks, join us for our next Troubleshooting Keto Master Workshop. Go to chatthefat.com/workshop to find upcoming dates and register for this totally free event. You just might find your missing piece of the puzzle. Until then, we'll see you next week on Chat the Fat.